I've been trying to get myself into a better headspace as of late, not just because I had gone through a recent breakup, but because I had to realize a bunch of things that I needed to work on myself, a lot of different things that I need to focus to make sure that I'm getting myself in the right headspace, in the right moment, making sure that I'm putting myself first. But that doesn't mean doing it in a selfish way, but rather it's doing it more in a take care of yourself so that you can go on and help others or be in the right headspace so that if difficult situations come along, then you're going to be prepared to deal with those things. Which I know I haven't been for a while. And I have this, I guess, the case of whenever I dive into a relationship or whenever I meet somebody new, get into a relationship, I just put too much effort. I force things to happen, and I kind of just get lost myself in the other individual. And that's something that I shouldn't be doing at all. So the interesting thing is that in regards to tarot, which is kind of what we're starting to talk about today, this is one of the cards for it, is that I used to do that many years ago because I just intuitively picked it up naturally, and it kind of helped as a way to I guess connect more with my intuitive self. That ended up helping me and then ended up helping others, but I just kind of dropped it along the way because I felt like if you didn't do it the right way, then it's not even worth it. So I'm kind of trying to pick that back up again because I kind of want to center myself a little bit again. So I figure, let me give this another shot again. So the interesting thing is that when I got my deck, it came with this handy dandy book. And this book actually has the story of the Fool's Journey. So I'm just going to be reading it straight from the book. So enjoy story time. It's kind of where it is. And then we can just kind of talk a little bit about it for fun. And just kind of see what's going on. So I'll just start off. And then as the story continues, I'm going to show different cards that are related to the actual journey. And so we can have at least some sort of picture reference to see what's exactly going on too. So it's almost like storytelling time with pictures. Just saying. So I'm going to start things off. So we're going to have the Fool's Journey. So we start off with the Fool. That's who he is. He's right there. So once upon a time, all right, this seems fun, I know. So once upon a time, a young man put on his favorite clothes, all of them at once, and started on a journey. He took a small bag of essential items, or at least what he thought of as essential. His faithful dog, which is right there at the very bottom right corner, his faithful dog followed along, even though she wasn't convinced this was a great idea. Guided by an inner drive that he couldn't really explain, he started off, and although he didn't know exactly where he was going, he walked with confidence because he trusted that inner voice. The white cuffs reminded him that his actions should reflect his pure intentions. His red feather cap was a sign of his passion and commitment to the quest. So that's essentially describing who he is and what he is about. So I love that because he has his white cuffs to show purity, and then his red feather in his cap as a sign of his passion and commitment to his quest. So if you can tell within just the picture itself, you can try to depict this kind of details as well, because you have the dog, you have the one outfit, the red feather on the cap, the white cuffs, all these different things. You can notice at the sun, you can notice the road, you can notice a little bit of everything. So, but this is kind of where our journey is starting off, basically. So, this is deep. Yeah, so again, you can take this as something very lighthearted and very fun, or you can take this as something a little bit more deep and serious. or somewhere in between. I take it as somewhere in between, just to kind of throw that out there. So now the next thing that we have is this one. Okay, the next card that we have is the Magician. Just to kind of give you an example of what the Magician card is, just to kind of have it right there. So he is, so also one other thing to notice, the Fool is represented by the 0 in the Arcana deck, whereas the Magician is represented with the number 1 in the Arcana deck. So even though there's 22 cards in the major Arcana, there it goes from 0 to 21. 0 being the Fool, and so on and so forth. So now we're gonna dive into the Magician. So the young man, our Fool, met a great and powerful man who could do amazing things. So the Fool made himself comfortable and watched and learned about magic. The key is to understand the energies that swirl around all the time. The energies have different names depending on who is talking about them. Fire, water, air, and earth. Will, emotions, thoughts, and matter. Once you understand how these work, alone and in combination, you can learn to control and to manifest dreams and create reality. More importantly, though, it is necessary to control these energies within yourself. To change yourself, that is the true magic. So, essentially, the Fool is bumping into the Magician as part of his journey. So, people nowadays watching anime being here listening about the cards of tarot, which is way more interesting, no lie. I'm glad you're finding this really interesting. I thought they were really interesting too. So that's why I'm just like, why do I know more about this? Okay. So just a kind of a recap. So the Magician along his journey meets the Magician. The Fool along his journey meets the Magician. And notices the Magician is a person who really can control all 4 different elements. And in the particular card that we have here, we see that he's holding up a wand, there's a cup, there's a coin, and there's a sword to go along with it. So what makes that really, really important is that the Magician has control of all of these different elements. As it said, it was the power of will, emotions, so the 2 that stuck out to me. Will, emotions, thoughts, and matter. So it's really interesting. And then basically it's just teaching the Fool that the most powerful thing that you can do is have change inside yourself. You can control all these different things. You can control your emotions, you can control your will, your thoughts, things that happen around you. But the true mastery is changing within yourself. So I love how the cards so far are kind of connected to each other and continuing the full start of the story. Yeah, and that's exactly what the Fool's journey is. That's exactly what the journey is. And the Fool is gonna interact with every single major arcana along the way. So we're gonna see the entire story of how he interacts with everything, of every single aspect of every single major arcana. And then in 2 weeks, because I plan on doing this every 2 weeks, then we're gonna go into insight into what each major arcana is about, and then maybe recapping a little bit about the Fool's journey of everything that occurred. So, all right, so so far he's met the Magician, and now we're gonna make a little bit of a shift. We're gonna continue. The Fool was all amped up after his visit with the Magician and wandered around in a bit of a stupor. The calm, cool terrace of the High Priestess was very inviting. He was rested there a while. So he rested there a while. She didn't really say anything. So he got bored, but was too tired to move on. So he continued to sit. At first, the strange symbols around her baffled him, but he kept staring at them, wondering what they could mean. He asked, but the High Priestess wouldn't answer. He quit trying to figure out and finally found himself lost in her gaze. She may have been surrounded in symbols, but her eyes were gateways to the undefined, undescribable mysteries of life. In the shade, he might have dozed. He might have dreamed. He wasn't sure. When he decided to move on, he felt different. Like he knew things that he didn't know before, but he wasn't exactly sure what. So that's the Empress. That's the interaction with her. Obviously, she's very beautiful, confident, sure of herself, and surrounded with a lot of symbols, just feeling very comfortable. And for the Fool interacting with her, with the interaction that he had, it started to become more sure of himself. But he wasn't exactly sure why or what changed. So a brief underlying thing about that is essentially the Empress is represented by intuition. So this is the card for basically making sure that you are trusting your inner self, your inner who you are, your intuition, the thing that tells you that is right. Go with that. So, but yeah, that's his interaction with the Empress. Was the Empress part of the Fool's journey, trying to tell the feelings when he gets you like someone? Could be super wrong at this point. It's just a guess. So basically the Empress in the part of the Fool's journey is trying to tell him like the feelings when you like somebody. So not exactly, it's rather the feelings that you get. I guess call it your intuition, right? Because here's the thing, he dozed off, he dreamed, he wasn't sure, so something was happening that he wasn't sure about. But when he decided to move on, he felt different, like he knew things he didn't know before, but he wasn't exactly sure what. And so have you ever had a moment of where you were about to do something and something inside of you told you to do it this specific way instead of how everyone else usually does it? Something inside you told you, do it this way, or go this route and not this route. And then when you listen, and then listening to that little voice, that's kind of where it is, and that's what we refer to as intuition. And so the Fool, while he's having his interactions with the Empress, he fell asleep, he got bored, he got all these different things, but when he came back to his own senses, he had this extra bit of knowledge that he couldn't really describe what it was. And that's what we call nowadays intuition. So that's kind of where it is. It's kind of having that inner voice, that gut feeling of doing something, but you just can't explain why. It just feels right. Oh, the way you described it is way more easier to understand than what the book was about. Yeah, well, that's because I know and I have knowledge about the different cards themselves. So I know a little bit more about the message behind each individual card and how that's interacting with the Fool's journey itself. So it's good to ask questions like this just to kind of understand kind of what's going on. So this is good stuff. So this one, that's the High Priestess. That's her. She's supposed to be the second card, not the Empress. The second card. So she is the one of intuition. That's kind of what I talked about. I just showed the wrong card. That's right. So the Empress, the hours, days, years, he wasn't really sure. That the Fool spent with the High Priestess left him feeling like he was more out of his body than in his body. Plus, he was hungry and a little homesick. He followed a trail of flowers to a strange alcove by the edge of the lake. In the middle of a field sat a rather gorgeous woman in a luxurious chair. Or maybe it was a throne. She wore a crown of stars. So she was probably a queen of something. She was kind and gave him fruit and milk and honey. She let him sleep in her chair and sang him songs that made the flowers bloom and the air sing. He made her a crown of flowers, and even though it wasn't as nice as her starry crown, she graciously wore it, and she packed him a huge lunch and sent him on his way. So that's kind of the Empress. That's his interaction with her, specifically. And so he wasn't sure how long or how much time he had spent time with the High Priestess. So now that he's gone along his way, he finds himself in this really great field with this woman just kind of sitting in the middle of it. So the Fool's journey is pretty much him meeting all of these people which change him, or at least teach him something about himself, and that's what I'm getting so far. Exactly. And keep in mind that the Fool, the Fool card, is supposed to represent us. Us in a journey. So now, meaning upon the Empress, he basically gets filled. So he feels happy, he feels filled, he feels like he was just taken care of, and he tries to do something nice for her in return. And even though the action or the thing that he was trying to do isn't as fancy or as good as what she already has at her disposal, she was happy at the fact that he was willing to do something for her out of his own accord, out of his own heart. So that's the Empress card. And then now we jump into the Emperor, which is this guy right here. So alright, so for the Emperor, the Fool was mindlessly munching on one of the Empress's sandwiches when he wandered upon the Emperor. The Fool wished he had been paying more attention, because he would have skipped this imposing character. Hope the dog doesn't get bored, lol. I mean, dogs have a way of staying pretty entertained. And the dog's on a journey too, so I'm pretty sure he's happy about that. Alright, so the Emperor demanded to be shown everything in the Fool's now overfull sack. He wanted to know what kind of journey the Fool was on, how long it would last, and how he will make his provisions stretch for the entire adventure. The Fool, of course, had no answers, and so the Emperor lectured him about the importance of responsibility, stewardship, and the general advisability of always having a plan. With the Emperor's help, they sorted his provisions so that he had enough for several days. Plus, the Fool did some odd jobs for the Emperor to earn some pocket money. So, now that we're at the Emperor is a very strong character, and actually demands the Fool to show him everything, like, why are you here, what's going on? And when he asks some very critical questions about his journey, what he's planning to do, the Fool didn't know how to answer anything. He was very unprepared, and so the Emperor taught him what he needs to do, how he needs to do it, so that he can make his journeys last for as long as possible. And it seems like the Fool took that advice, and in addition, he decided to earn some extra money to be safe on his journeys rather than going into it unprepared. So he decided to just take some odd jobs here and there from the Emperor. So far, the Emperor, even though he was a very strong character and very strong about that, he went and taught him what he needed to do, which was great. I think it's talking about how odd and unpredictable life can be and how people don't think about what they're going to do in life. Yeah, that it can be that too. You are right on the money too. You're catching on, Oswald. I like that. You're catching on. Yeah, that's kind of what it is too. So, and again, this is the beauty about the Fool's Journey, is that even though that's kind of what I'm reading and I'm sharing like my personal thoughts on it, there is no right or wrong answer when it comes to this stuff. Whatever feels right to you, chances are it's probably correct. So I'm just saying that's pretty important and amazing. So I'm glad you share that too. So now that he had his moment with the Emperor, now he's gonna meet the Hierophant. Now this is a very unique character, I'm gonna tell you that. If the Emperor was scary, the Hierophant was just crazy. What is up with that hat and those crazy gesticulations? Curious, he joined the small group that listened to the Hierophant. After a while, a basket was passed around and people put money in it. The fool didn't, but instead waited until everyone left and asked what the money was for. The Hierophant explained that it was to feed the poor and take care of the priests and priestesses who served the people. It was his job to help the people to live according to their beliefs, to make the right choices, and to grow spiritually. The fool had a lot more questions, and the Hierophant patiently answered them. I love this so far. Yeah, this is a pretty nice, interesting story. And I'm glad I took the extra time to have the cards there so we can all have a visual of what's going on. So, essentially, the Hierophant is a priest. And the fool thought he is straight up crazy. Why is he wearing this ridiculous outfit? Why are people listening to him? Why are people giving money to some random basket? What is going on? I'm so confused. And the fool was not afraid to just ask the Hierophant, hey, what is this money for? What is going on? Why are you doing this and that? And even though we don't get an exact glimpse of every single question that was asked, we can kind of get a really good idea of maybe thinking within ourselves, like what kind of questions, if we were in the fool's shoes, what could we have possibly asked if we were placed in that similar situation. So, and in the major arcana, the Hierophant is supposed to be the character of your moral, spiritual core of who you are. So this can be either your religious beliefs, this can be your moral compass, and making sure that you stay true to what that is. So the Hierophant is a very unique card in regards to that, and then kind of how that's all playing into the Fool's Journey as well. So very interesting card, and I love the Fool's reaction at the beginning, which was like, this guy is just straight up crazy. If I thought the Emperor was cray, this guy is cray. So fun little anecdote to go along with that. So then the next one is really interesting. I kind of like this. I kind of like this part of the story myself. So this one is the Lovers. So this is kind of where things are gonna get a little bit. He's definitely learning a lot more stuff. So this story is like, I guess, about charity, helping other people that don't have much. Because you were talking about how they were getting money for poor people and whatnot. Yes. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. And that's the beauty of it, because a lot of the times when we give people money, charity, any kind of those sources to help other people, and a lot of times it's because that's what feels right for us to do. It is something that some of us are inclined to do. And so the Hierophant is the one that kind of exemplifies that as well. So I'm glad you're catching on to that. That's really insightful too. So okay, now we're jumping into the Lovers. So in a clearing at a fork in the Fool's Path, a naked couple listened to an angel. The angel said, You both recognize each other as your heart's desire. You are choosing wisely. The couple embraced and turned to leave. As they did, a new path opened up as if by magic. Hand in hand, they walked the path, which disappeared behind them. The angel saw the fool's astounded expression and said, "When you choose the path of your heart, it will be yours and yours alone." The fool sat under the tree with apples, ate one, and stared at the burning tree. Part of him wanted to go home. He looked back and way he'd come and saw plants emerging, reclaiming the route, making it impossible to follow. He decided to seek more adventures. A path revealed itself, and the fool continued on his way. So, even though very common and popular belief is that when they see the Lover's card, the automatic reaction is, oh, it's a relationship, we're gonna have love, we're gonna have that extra somebody. Hey, Prediable, I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome onto the stream. How are you doing today? Okay, so this is obviously about love. Yeah, that's usually the immediate interaction, but they associate that love with the actual person. And that could be the case, but that doesn't always have to be an actual person. I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty well. I'm just kind of having a very chill Sunday, and can you help me with one thing? I mean, if I can, sure. But kind of what I was going back to it a little bit earlier is, yeah, you can love, I don't know, food. I think it's a little bit deeper than just food per se. So, but I think it's definitely one of those things where you want to follow your passion, right? Because I think it's interesting that like within the story itself, it was that you recognize each other as your heart's desire and you're choosing wisely. So even though it's represented with like two specific people, it can literally be any one thing that you just love a lot. Then the next card that we have is the Chariot. I love watching these streams. Lol. So the Chariot card actually looks pretty nice. Look, the card worked. Yeah, basically. So, and this one is really fun and interesting as well. So, this is what it says. The fool felt pretty good about his choice, although part of him was still anxious. All doubt vanished when he came upon the Chariot. He never knew he wanted one until he saw it. He walked all around it, admiring all the features. It was like the culmination of his recent adventures. The canopy reminding him of the Empress's celestial crown. The square sturdiness will have delighted the Emperor. He climbed in and noticed a wand. Here, he thought, is the magician. He held up the wand and thought about moving on. Slowly, creakily, the horses stood up and started walking, and the chariot lurched into motion. So, this one in particular is really interesting because the card itself and what it's supposed to represent is picking up new things and just going forward with them. So like if there's something new that you're trying to start out for the first time, like if you're starting a new school or if you're starting a new hobby, if you're gonna start driving for the first time, things like that, it's a matter of just kind of picking it up and have confidence and just going along with it. That's what the card is usually supposed to represent. So I think it's interesting how, at least for this particular card, the Fool is starting to feel a lot more confident in himself. He's starting to kind of resemble the different aspects of different people that he's met throughout his journey. like the magician, the empress, and the king. I'm sorry, the emperor, and kind of taking that as himself. Like he's been learning all these different things, and now he's about to go and do these things on his own. Put all these different things into practice and go forward with them. So I personally like that aspect of the card itself. So yeah, this is I think a really good card, because it gives you something to be excited about instead of being scared when you go and do new things. So now we're gonna jump into the next card, and this one usually has a misconception heading right off the bat. Oh, that came out really small. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, that pretty much is what I wanted to say. Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page. So this card is usually interpreted very literal, like, especially because when you see it, it's like, oh, this person is wrestling a lion. That is so strong. You gotta have your inner strength. But this is what happens in the Fool's Journey. It might give you a different perspective. So it says, the fool was so focused on steering his new chariot, and he almost ran into a woman and a lion. Without thinking, only reaction to a perceived danger, the fool jumped out and ran to help. The woman was making shushing noises, trying to calm the lion. And amazingly, the lion was responding. The woman knelt down and plucked a thorn from the lion's paw. Relieved of pain, the lion fell heavily to the ground, and the woman continued to soothe him. Looking at the fool, she said, "Most wild noble beings only lash out or attack when they are in pain or afraid, like animals, other people, and your own glorious spirit." But I was thinking, because the book was saying how the fool looked around the chariot, it was like he liked it a lot, and so I was thinking that he could have been something like, sometimes when you want something you can't always get, and without working for it or something like that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how you can get that, because it was just kind of there, and he just kind of like, hey, I jumped right into it. Let me just kind of take it. So, and this strength one is talking about how not every situation needed to end with violence. Yeah, I find that really interesting, because right at the beginning it looked like, you know, a very much survival of the fittest. You're gonna have a lion and this other person wrestling, when, interesting enough, the woman, which by the way, I think in normal culture a woman will stand no chance against a lion, because they're usually more fragile, more feminine, more like not as strong physically compared to men. But I think it's interesting, because in this situation as well, it's not so much of we're gonna fight it out. Instead, the woman was able to sense that the lion was in pain and was trying to help and soothe the lion instead. So I think that's really interesting, that not every approach that we have needs to, as you were saying, needs to end in violence or needs to have a confrontation. It needs to have some sort of butting heads and altercation. Sometimes it takes one person to understand what the problem is, and then knowing how to tackle it appropriately versus violently per se, or going about it in the wrong way. So it's really interesting how the strength, how some of these cards are not necessarily direct strength, brute muscles and things like that. I like that one. Yes. Interesting enough, the strength card is a smart card. It's a card about really understanding what problems are and what issues are, and knowing exactly how to confront them. So, because normally bullies attack random people, they're not strong, and they get their anger out on them, because usually bullies attack people because they have problems in their family or something like that. Yeah, usually there's something deeper going on within that person that You just kind of need to figure out and understand, and then approach that part of the problem, regardless if that person is coming off as very intimidating, very violent, etc., etc. I'm going to see Aladdin. I will leave you on for the bump up. By the way, I like these sessions. Keep doing your thing. Thanks so much, Robster, and enjoy Aladdin. That movie is lit right now from what I've read in the reviews. You're gonna love it, so I hope you enjoy it. That one is The Hermit. May as well. You will expose yourself to a new market too. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to cross over to YouTube with videos, and I think this might be the best way to do it, personally. So, how many cards are there? There are 22 major Arcana decks. 22. And right now we're in card number 10. So we're almost halfway through. So, okay. So, now we have the Hermit. So the Hermit. It was getting dark, and the fool thought he should stop traveling for the night. As he was starting to set up a makeshift camp, he saw a man with a lantern. I don't want it to end. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a really good story. Okay. As he was starting to set up a makeshift camp, he saw a man with a lantern. The man wasn't paying any attention to the fool. Instead of being very focused on the path in front of him, stepping carefully in a small pool of light created by the lantern. The fool followed up a mountain. The hermit finally stopped and said, "Why do you follow me? This is my light and my path. I go to the mountain to be alone and to think about things." The fool knew enough to take a hint and headed back down to his chariot, thinking, if I had a light of my own, I could travel more easily in the dark. He fell asleep wondering how he could make a lantern. So, Hermit. That's very interesting, because the Hermit is kind of a little bit more exactly what it's meant to be, except it's a little bit more deeper, right? Like, you think of a hermit as someone who's very reserved into themselves, doesn't go out to people. They're very much kept to themselves. But the deeper meaning behind this too is that this person, because they have a lantern, they follow their own path. And this is a path that works for them. This is a path that keeps them on the right track. And I like that a lot, because I think all of us, I think maybe at some point we meet that one friend, or we have that one friend that is just marching to the beat of their own drum. And sometimes we think of them like there's something wrong with them. They're not right in the head. I don't know why they're doing that. They're a little crazy and things like that. When actually, they're just following their own path. They're following their own instinct. They're following exactly what feels right to them. They're trusting their own instinct in what needs to happen and what needs to do. So, okay, this one might be talking about how people sometimes need alone time and how sometimes people want to tackle things alone. Yeah, that can be that as well, to be honest. There's a lot of different ways to interpret the Hermit as well. And so that perspective that you're having, that you're expressing, it can be right on the money too. So, and kind of how I explained a little bit earlier, a lot of these things, it really comes down to whatever feels right to you and what your instinct is telling you as well. So, and at the end, in the Fool's Journey, is supposed to be our personal journeys through all these different experiences. So, yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. So then the next one that we have is, this is a little bit of a funny one in my opinion. I think it's a little funny, so. Like you said, there is no wrong to these. It's all about how you think about it. Exactly. That's exactly where it is. So. And when it comes to tarot, even though certain cards have very specific definitions, you have to trust your instinct. Whatever your instinct is telling you, that's what should rule over whatever other preconception you may have about the card itself. So that makes the Fool's Journey special to me. It does. It really, really does. So yeah, every Fool's Journey is different for everybody's life. So it's a good one. So then the next one that we have is the Wheel of Fortune. I think this one's a little bit funny, and you might see why. So it says, during the night, the fool dreamed. He saw a large wheel covered in strange symbols and written by a bizarre golden snake. The snake became more excited as its head rose higher and higher. When it was at the top, the creature started screaming and flailing, unable to stop its own fall. Then a delicate girl, clearly stronger than she looked, spun the wheel. The snake wailed and clutched, trying not to be flung off. A voice whispered very close to the fool's ear, "It's easier to hold on if you stay in the center." So, moral of the story. And this is really interesting because this is all, I guess, happening in the middle of the night, in the fool's dream. Moral of the story, don't be like the snake. So, that's what I found about it. I think that's a little bit funny to me about how to interpret that one. But Wheel of Fortune sometimes, I mean, depending on the person, is highs and lows that we all have throughout our lives. And, I mean, you can get into the reversed meaning, but yeah, that's kind of what this is all about. This might be talking about rich people, how they rise. Do you want to go a little bit deeper into what do you mean by how rich people rise? How they rise up and then start being dicks and start coming down and falling down because they lose friends. Wow, that's insightful. I like that. I didn't think about it that way, but that's one way to interpret it, actually. I can see that completely, so very nice. I like that. So now, after we're done with the dream, now we go into justice. I pressed enter on accident and wanted to say more. You're good. You can keep saying, oh, okay. I mean, you can keep saying more. That's not a problem. So, the next card that we have is the Justice. So, I'll get started on this one. So it says, in the morning, the fool got into his chariot. The weirdness of last night's dream is still clinging to him. Soon, he saw a formal-looking building with lots of pillars and steps. At the top of the steps was a woman holding a sword and a set of scales. People were on the steps, listening and watching as other people went up and pled their cases. The fool couldn't hear what was being said, and he noticed some people he left in tears, while others seemed happy and still others determined. He asked a fellow observer what was going on and was told, "Oh, it's just people finding out that they have to sleep in the beds that they've made." The fool must have looked blank because the person continued, "Some people never learn that they get what they deserve." I mean, it's called the Wheel of Fortune, so the first thing that I thought was rich people. Ah, you know what that's called, Oswald? That's called intuition. Sometimes having those initial thoughts, and then after having that initial thought, going into what the story is about, and then having a final conclusion gives you an entire picture based on your initial intuition or your initial instinct, your initial gut feeling. So, when it comes to tarot, you always want to listen to that gut feeling or that first impression or that intuition if it's that clear for you. If it's that clear and that precise, listen to it and then get a little bit more information and then form your final conclusions. So it says, pretty much what I was thinking is because she said they're going to sleep in the beds they made. Some were crying because they made the beds poorly because they didn't care about the quality of others. And other people that found joy were happy because they cared for their friends and their village or whatnot. So they made exactly comfy beds because they cared for other people. When they heard that they're going to sleep in their comfy beds, they got happy. Yeah. I guess this is the question for you, is have you heard of the expression, you're gonna lie in the bed that you made? Or lie in the bed that you made? Because if you have, then you will literally have. That's kind of what it's talking about, is that deeper meaning behind it. And but if you haven't, the expression comes from, I guess, a very karma. No, I did not. So that's fine. But you are exactly on the right thought. Your instinct is correct on this. I'm just gonna expound on it just a little bit more to give a little bit more clarity, because it's not just because the beds is like the beds is the metaphor of what's going on. So the expression lie, you're gonna lie in the bed that you've made, it means it's a very karma thing to do. So if you think of it kind of like in the bed situation, right? Yeah, you are correct, Oswald. This is all about intuition. You cannot go wrong if you're listening to your intuition. I just wanted to let you know that. If you're listening to your intuition, you cannot go wrong. Yeah, it sounds like karma, right? Yes. So you have some people that don't care about certain things. There are people who expect things to just be done for them without putting any work. If people are just being douchebags, whatever they are, at the end of the day, they're gonna get all of that returned back. And so that's kind of what lying in the bed that you've made is, that this is how much effort you've put into it, so now this is what you're gonna get back in return. Versus the people who have put a lot of work, have been nice, all these different things, but then you always wonder and ask, you know, why is life treating them so poorly? They're such a nice person. They're so charitable. They're always being so nice to me. They're always talking with me. They always want to be my friend, all these different things. But then they're having a hard time. Just know that at some point, because this is all of the effort that they're putting into it, that all of that is going to come back to them. And they're going to get justice, in a sense, for what they've been doing. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but there is a stream delay. So you ask me something, wait for like 5 seconds for me to get to the question. Yeah, you're fine. No worries. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that I expounded on that a little bit better. So it's a good card for those that have been putting a lot of good energy and a lot of good and positivity out there, to know they're gonna get that back in return. So jumping on to the next thing is the Hanged Man. So, and it's a problem in my side because I have a different streams as well, so don't worry, nothing wrong with your stream. You're fine. I'm not worried, so no worries on that. So the Hanged Man, I'm just gonna give a actually, let me just read into the story of it. So the fool saw a man hanging upside down in a tree. He wondered, remembering the lesson from Justice, what the man had done to deserve this when the hanging man spoke. I know what you're thinking, and you're wrong. The hangman explained that he chose to hang in the tree, giving his liberty as sacrifice, as an offering. He sought enlightenment in a new way of seeing the same old world. He had been trying hard for years, studying and working, but making no progress. So he decided to not give up, but to give over, committing to wait as long as it took. Sometimes, he continued, there is nothing you can do but wait. Just be still and quiet so you can listen. The fool respected that and quit talking. But he stayed and watched for a while. Slowly, a halo of light started glowing behind the man's head, growing in size and brightness, and the man stayed silent, eyes closed, but his face lit up with a radiant smile. So the Hanged Man, a lot of people, when they usually see this card, some of the first thoughts are, this guy is gonna die, this guy is being punished, this is retribution for something, he's getting his just desserts, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that he chose to be there in the story. He's choosing to be there. He gave up his freedom so he can have enlightenment instead. It's like the rich uncle that just gives everything to you when his deathbed comes. Lol. Oswald, I think you're thinking of a sugar daddy, where you're hoping he's on his deathbed and just waiting for him to just drop the dime so you can cash in on all that money. Yeah, I was gonna say he chose to be there. Yes. He chose to be there. But the thing is that he's sacrificing his own liberty and he's sacrificing his own freedom to seek enlightenment and to do what he feels is right. So I guess think of it in a situation where someone wants to do something that they have never done in their life, but they feel like they need to do it. They feel like it's their time to take a risk and a gamble. The matter of the fact is that it's their own intuition, it's their own sense of self that's telling them to do this thing, even though it's different and opposing to anything that they've ever believed in. But it's something that they need to do because they need to get that kind of enlightenment that the hangman is getting at the very end. It's something that some people just kind of need to do to be at peace with themselves, to do the thing that feels right to them, even if it's an unpopular decision or an unpopular belief. But it's something that they have to follow so they can have that peace of mind, and to follow their calling in a sense. So that's my 2 cents on it, personally. But I'm still very curious to why you have to say about that, Oswald. In the meantime, okay, they feel that something has to change. Even if they're scared about the change, they do it because they want to. Yeah, that's right. It's a choice that they're making to make sure that something has to change. Perhaps something that they're not happy about, or probably something that they just want to make better at. Whatever the reason is, that's kind of why it is. So then the next one is another popular misconcepted card, which is death. So a lot of people think, oh, death, someone is gonna die, there's a death in your family. Because, you know, some people can get into that kind of train of thought because they see the death card, like, oh my gosh, we're all gonna die, Armageddon 2019, the apocalypse is coming, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are here to rampage on our houses. I just want to make sure that I set the record straight about how this card plays into the story, because also one very important thing, this card is coming in as the 13th card, not the last card of the entire story. So, plot twist. So then this is how it goes. The fool must have stayed with the hangman for longer than he thought, because when he set off again, the sun was setting. In the distance, he heard moaning and wailing, so he approached cautiously, and he was glad he did. Hiding his chariot, he scrambled closer to a frightful scene. Nearly hidden behind the skeleton's cloak lay a dead king. Other people were crying out. The skeleton turned its head and looked right at the fool with his empty eye sockets. A cold shiver shuddered through the fool's soul, and he knew without a doubt that he needed to talk with death. Leaving behind his beloved chariot, his knapsack, and his few meager belongings, he walked with death towards the sun fading on the horizon. Oh my gosh, we're all gonna die as Armageddon 2019, basically. This card is really, really interesting. And the death card is actually not a bad thing, in my opinion. I think anyone who has a concept of what death card is will believe the same way. for those that know nothing and just see the card for face value, will basically not agree with this definition. But this is the really interesting thing. Death is not there to inflict upon literal death to the actual person, but rather, death is there, at least in the story of the Fool. Death is there to basically guide the Fool onto a next phase of his journey, leaving everything else behind, because he's leaving the chariot, his knapsack, his belongings. He's leaving everything behind and just walking with death into the night. This one is interesting, and the only death in the story is the king. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is supposed to be a king of swords. I think that's kind of what's represented there in the picture as well, where the definition of the card is supposed to be the end of something old and the beginning of something new. And sometimes the beginning of that something new means that you leave everything else behind. I guess you can look at it life after a breakup, or life after you're done with school and you already have your degree, life after a divorce, things of that nature, where you're ending something in your life and a chapter of your life, and then you're ready to start the next one. It's like leaving your childhood. You leave your toys, you leave the fun. When you were a child, you're ready to move on from that phase. Exactly. Yep. That's kind of what the death is supposed to represent. So, yeah. Because then the next one that we have is Temperance in our story. So, the Fool still felt dazed after his night with death. And if he wasn't filling up his body properly, he almost... Hold on, let me reread that again. So, the Fool still felt dazed after his night with death, as if he wasn't filling up his body properly. He almost bumped into an angel with glorious wings who was doing magical things with white vases and liquid. The angel set down her vases and assessed the Fool. The angel saw into the Fool all the piles of treasure scattered around, and all the empty spaces too. The angel picked up the chalice up again and held them up high. She turned to face each of the directions, speaking beautiful words to the sky. The angel poured the liquid back and forth before finally handing one to the Fool, who, without question or doubt, drank it. The empty places of his soul filled up, and the Fool was more fully in his body. He was more fully in himself in every way. Death stripped him bare, leaving fertile soil and a few seeds. And the angel watered the seeds, and already they were growing. So, this is a really nice card. This is a really nice message that sometimes, at least the way I take it, is that sometimes when we are feeling vulnerable, we're feeling lonely, we're feeling stressed, or sometimes there may be something within us that we just can't fill up, that extra something that's missing. Temperance is almost like replenishing of the energy that's missing, or filling up the gaps of something that was not understood before. It's like trying to grow something new, or growing a new potential within you that you didn't know you had before. So it's a good card because it shows growth. It shows your ability, new abilities that you can have within yourself, at least from the way that it's being told in the story, from what I understand. So this is kind of when you overcome something that happened in your life, like in death of a family member. You get over it. You get over it over time. It takes time, but you do get over it. Yeah, you are right. So these are all really fun cards. Okay, this is the not so fun card. Be careful. Viewer discretion is advised. because of partial nudity. Just partial. Anyways. Then the next one is the devil. So, this one is kind of as bad as it may seem, in my personal opinion. So, it says, feeling jaunty and revived, the fool continued on his way with a spring in his step. The day was so bright, and the air felt so good. He heard strange sounds, like a confusion of tortured moans and diabolical laughter. Oh, the devil, how the hell did I guess that he's gonna be there? Lol. He did not want to follow the sounds, but knew he had to investigate. Finding the entrance to a cave, he went in and saw a man and a woman chained together. A large demon taunted them until it saw the fool. Suddenly, the fool found himself chained to a pillar. His fear bubbled up from the stomach through his veins, and panic coursed through every synapse in his brain. The chains became tighter and his terror worse. The demon's voice filled the fool's mind. You are nothing. You have learned nothing. You will never be worthy. So, at least in regards to this card, in my personal opinion, I think it's just a lot of negative energy, a lot of pessimistic attitudes, a lot of self-doubt, lack of confidence, our inner voice that tells us we're not good enough. It's kind of starting to come out and to manifest itself. Because it's interesting knowing that the fool has had all these different experiences, has met all these different people, and the fact that he just came from being with Temperance, which, as it said at the beginning, he felt jaunting, revived, a spring in his step, all these different things. Now he's caught in this situation. It almost feels like none of that stuff ever happened, because that's all being played out in your mind. Pretty much negative crap. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's all the negativity that we don't need to be in our we do not need to have in our lives. Blah, I need to speak. And as you notice, all those thoughts chain us, that drag us down. We feel captive, like we're slaves to this thing, which hopefully we're not gonna get to be for the long haul. Is something that we all need to kind of break out of, but we all experience from time to time. So the next card is the Towers. So it says, the fool was still bound in the demon's cave. He'd given up struggling and was hurtled on the ground, holding himself and rocking back and forth. When he rocked forward, he could see outside the mouth of the cave. He could see a tall tower on top of a hill, clouds gathering behind it. The storm churning overhead echoed the chaotic whispers engulfing the fool's mind. As the energy built in the sky and in his brain, it considered illuminating everything. The fool's truth, a hard-won truth, wrestled from the cold hands of death, flashed in his mind, and surged through his being. The chains fell away, and on pure instinct, the fool ran out of the cave in time to see the sky splitting and the mighty tower turn into a pile of rubble on the hill. So that's the tower. It's very descriptive, so that I think that's kind of an interesting take, because at least in part of the story, the fool remembered what he was about. He almost felt like he was gonna die, because like it said, the fool's truth, a hard-won truth, wrestled from the cold hands of death, meaning that after his new beginning, he found his truth, and it wasn't an easy truth to find. He had to get himself right back up, and all that struggle, all the chains, all the things that were weighing him down fell down, and as soon as that happened, the tower was struck. And it's interesting because the Towers card is supposed to be a restructuring of everything in your life. It's like trying to let go of the things that haven't worked and start again, focusing on things that are going to work for you. And that's kind of what happened in the Fool story. He started focusing on the things that have worked and the things that will work, and let go of the things that were just not part of his progression, of his story, of his truth. Let them go. And as soon as that happened, the chains dropped and the tower fell. So, coincidence? I don't believe in such thing as coincidences, but the journey can be tricky sometimes. Yeah, how you see this is much better than how I saw it. How did you see it? I wanna know how you saw it. There it is. This is kind of the card that I'm looking at right now. So, I like the way that one looks. They look very similar. I like the fact that it still kept the same similar concept. So, total views 2,222. That's your number, Cypher. How's it going? Welcome back. We're moving along with the full story and kind of taking a pause in between each one, and then just kind of talking a little bit about some of the things that are happening, and then sharing some of our instincts about what it comes to mind in regards to the full story of what we're learning. So, it says, I couldn't hear the whole thing because my mom was talking to me, but I think it's something about when something old in your life collapses, when you lose one thing that means a lot to you. But then I didn't hear you say much, so I didn't have something that completely counters to what I'm on about. Oh, okay. Yes. So the thing is that, I mean, you're on the right track, Oswald, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Even though you didn't hear a lot of it, your instinct is right on point when we're talking about the story and things like that. Like, something in your whole life collapses. And the thing is, when something collapses, or when something you're starting over again, you know, it is a matter of, you know, are you okay with losing those things? Are you gonna hold on to those things? Are you gonna hold on to the rubble? Or are you just gonna like accept the fact that this is something that needs to change, this is something that it's lost, this is something that has happened, and then move forward with that? So I like the outlook that you had about this as well. So that was the Towers. We're going into our last 5 cards of the story. The next one is the Star. So let me get back to my story. Looks like I gotta get some water. The Star. Okay. The Fool was battered, bruised, and burned after his experiences in the Devil's Cave, and running past the exploding tower. He had left everything behind with death and felt lost, and he hated to admit it, a little betrayed. Looking up at the brilliant stars in the dark sky made him feel better. One seemed so much brighter than the rest, and he followed it onto the clearing when a woman was pouring water into the pond. She approached him quietly, took his hand, and motioned for him to rest on the shore. She sang star songs and poured water over him. His wounds healed, and he felt like his heart healed too. He didn't know how to thank her, so he sang a song from his heart. She gave him a kiss on the forehead, and he started on his path again, feeling more certain on his way. So I guess I was kind of close. Also, you have to realize that you're a lot closer to some of these things that feel right to you in regards to the cards and the interactions with the Fool than you think it is. And that's the beauty about instinct, is that you always want to follow that gut feeling, that instinct, that impression that you're getting. It certainly goes a long way. And if you have, And then once you find out the full story of maybe what's going on or hearing a little bit more detail about it, kind of getting the full picture of it, and then you're probably going to be right exactly on the money. Instinct is such an amazing thing, and we all have it, and listening to it is the best thing that you can do for yourself, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff, because this kind of stuff is all instinct based. So you can't, like, as I kept saying throughout the entire stream, and I probably will never get tired of saying it, when it comes to this kind of stuff, instinct is always the number one thing that you can do, always. So I guess to kind of recap a little bit with what's going on with the star, is that his interaction that he's been having with the star, it's great because he followed the brightest star that he saw in the sky, which could be interpreted as the North Star, until he met a woman who healed and mended his wounds that he already had from his past interactions with the devil, and now feeling betrayed, I guess going with death, he needed to not just be physically mended from the devil, but he also needed to be emotionally / spiritually mended because of his interaction with death, because he had to leave everything behind to walk with him. And so the star was kind of there as a healer and as a mender for him in his journey, to where at the end he says that he started his path again feeling more certain of his way. So sometimes it's a nice little break stop for us to kind of recollect ourselves before going on to the next thing. So this one, I feel like it's when someone helps you heal the wounds of his past phase. He didn't like the new face death gave him. He wanted his old one back. Helps you heal the wounds of the past phase. Yeah, and you know what's the interesting thing is that, and maybe, just maybe, because I like the fact that you're saying he wanted his old one back. That is definitely, how do I phrase it? It is something that can be accurately interpreted as well. Just because we start a new phase in our lives, or because we start something new, it doesn't always mean that we're gonna like it. It doesn't always mean that we're gonna love it, right? And sometimes, because we just feel so down and betrayed, we need that extra boost of like, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? I hate this. It's so bad. So this girl just helped him continue on his new phase. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I like about it too. So, and so now the next thing, our last 4 cards, then we have the sun. I'm sorry, the moon. Not the sun. The sun is after. The moon first. So everything was going great for the fool. Into the clouds covered the tiny stars. His way was lit only by the ghostly light of the moon. Shadows formed, making everything confusing. Water poured onto the path, but he couldn't figure out where it came from. A lobster crawled out of the water and onto the path, looking like a horrible monster. He heard wolves howling in the distance and thought they were coming closer. He panicked and ran around, bumping into the stones and trees. When he stopped to catch his breath, underneath the pounding of his heart, he felt guidance rising up. Stop. Look. Listen. Listen from within. Calmer now, he realized his eyes were adjusting and he could see. The path led between 2 pillars, and he knew that was the way to go. So the moon is a little bit tricky. Not tricky as like it's a trickster card or anything like that, but rather it's tricky because the moon card is one of those things where not everything that appears is what it seems. Like, for example, the path got dark and he saw water on the path, but he didn't know where it was coming from. He saw a lobster, but he thought the lobster was like a monster. The wolves were howling, and it gave the impression that they were getting closer and closer to where he was. When rather, he just kind of needed to just wait, adjust his vision, get a little bit more clarity, and then he knew, oh, this is what's going on, this is where I need to go, which is where we see the two pillars in between. And not everything was as scary as he initially thought it was going to be. So it's a really interesting card. It's one of those interesting cards that it's almost like telling us, it's almost like getting played by the darkness, but it's not intentional. It's just kind of the stuff that we think is this way, or we may feel is this way, when in reality it's probably not even that. We have the sun. So then for the sun, we have, by the time the sun was high in the sky, the fearful, oh, hold on. This might be when you are scared and don't know what to do with your life, when you should go after you leave your parents' home. You need to take a moment and to think about where he should go. That's my opinion about the moon. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's sometimes things around you look really, really scary, and you need to figure out your way. So I like it. I like it a lot. It's really good how you're putting all of that stuff into words. It's really good. I like it. So then we have the sun next, and it says, by the time the sun was high in the sky, the fearful memories of the night before were fading, and the fool felt positively cheerful. He came to a lovely field filled with flowers, including plenty of sunflowers drinking in the warm sunlight. Okay, I read that. Then the fool saw the strangest thing. 2 young children. The child even had a red ribbon, something that had been the fool's trademark until he lost it with his adventures with death. The child put the ribbon on the fool's head and motioned for the fool. The fool did, and the children vanished. So now we kind of see everything coming back full circle, on where now is the morning, it's the sun. He's just gotten over that very scary face with the moon, and he's bumping himself into this kind of a picture. And then the first thing that he notices is that red ribbon going on, and it reminds him of when he first started, when he was first getting ready to go on his journey. And we can see the comparison with the card itself, where we see, that there is like his red feather, the reds underneath his sleeve, things like that. Like, they're all resembling of when he first started. And if I may add my own footnote here, if we notice also at the beginning, we mentioned that the fool wore white cuffs to remind him of his purity in his intentions. And then we also have the white horse in there as well, also, which could be a representative of the chariot that he lost along his journey right before he started his journey with death. So I feel like this is one of those things where it just comes around full circle, and then once he grasps back into that red ribbon, the children vanish. So it could be more of one of those symbolic things as well, but it's kind of coming full circle. Also, the sun, now that he's being remembered of when he first started his journey, everything is bright, everything is happy, everything is cheery, it feels genuinely happy, which is kind of how he first started off in his journey. So it's a nice thought and feeling to kind of have as he's coming into this part. So now with this, we're jumping into our last 2 cards. And this is where things are gonna get very, very interesting. And now this one is when you find the purpose in your life. When the memories of when you didn't know what to do with your life, when the moon happened, starts to fade. When you see a bright future ahead of you, reminds you of when you started the journey, you didn't know what to expect. And now you stop thinking fully about wanting to go back to the previous phase of your life because you found happiness again. Exactly. Exactly. You're right on the money, Oswald. It's kind of scary, just throwing that out there. But that's because you're sharing what you're feeling and what your inner intuition is telling you about this thing. So it's great. It's good. So now we jump into the Judgement, and it says, after riding around long and hard, laughing into the sunshine, the fool felt like he was done, and also curiosity started tugging at him. What was beyond that wall? The one with all the sunflowers along it. He climbed over and saw a huge cemetery that reached as far as the horizon. Angels appeared in the sky and started blowing trumpets, although the fool couldn't hear any sound. Some graves opened up, and people, alive and shining with heavenly light, rose up and disappeared. While the fool was puzzling out what happened, he felt his soul rise up and a song burst from his throat. He didn't know how, but he could hear the trumpet and hear his own voice combining to make the most glorious, majestic song ever made. All the layers of the fool's experience began to merge. He lifted his face to the sky and sang his prayer of love and gratitude. He glimpsed the divine within him and in every bit of the world. So this is kind of coming in. I mean, when we think about the judgment or a judgment, right? I think in every sect of possibly Christianity, I don't know anything else outside of that, but everyone believes of a final judgment, a rapture of sorts, where the just are gonna be lifted up. This one is the end, huh? No, we still got one more card after this. We still got one more. This is the pre-finale, but I think it's interesting how in those beliefs, everyone is supposed to be judged according to their deeds throughout their life, and that they're gonna be lifted up to be in the grace of God. That is what most Christian sects believe. I'm not sure what any other sects believe, but I think it could be something very similar, where either you're reaching a state of nirvana, a state of eternal life, happiness. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but it's interesting how in this scenario, the fool is encountering this scene happening, keeping in mind he's not dead. He's still very much alive, because he sees all these different people coming out from the graves. So it's not like he suddenly dropped dead. Arguably, but that's just the way I'm looking at it. So it says, so pretty much what you're saying right now is what I'm thinking. Okay. The final part, which is, and this is the last card, so this is coming to an end, per se, which is the world. And so I'll just get started on this one, and it says, the cemetery vanished, and the fool stood in an empty field. Eventually, all that vibrating with wonder made his legs weak, and he lay down and watched the clouds against the blue sky. As humans have done from the dawn of time, he saw pictures there that told him a beautiful story about success and completion. He fell asleep, dreaming about his adventures and wondering what would come next. When he woke, he was on a cloud, and there was a portal marked by a laurel wreath. He couldn't see what was beyond it. The opening was reflective, and he saw only himself. He adjusted his red feather, smiled with anticipation, and jumped through. So I guess this is kind of where things come to an end. So I guess it's kind of like of a the endish kind of a status. So at the end, he just kind of had to like go through it. That was it. This was like his final moments. So yep, this is the end. He fell asleep dreaming about his adventures and wondering what would come next. I mean, it's interesting because he saw pictures there that told him a beautiful story about success and completion. So it's just kind of nice to be able to kind of see, and maybe in a very retrospective look, kind of be able to see how everything came at the end, how everything that he had already done, he saw everything complete before him. So, and even though he couldn't see what was going to happen next, at least he was very reflective and of everything that he had already done. So, and then he was excited for the next thing that was going to occur, for the next thing that was going to happen. So, feels nice. We are all the fools of the journey. Like, the fool is supposed to represent us. And like I said at the beginning, just because it says it's a fool, it doesn't mean that we are the literal definition of a fool, per se. I think it's really important to understand that we are, but no lie, The Fool's Journey is not my favorite story, like, ever. Yeah, you didn't expect that. No, I did not at all. Not at all at all. But here is the interesting part. Like, all of these are actual cards, which represent the major arcanas of the tarot. And so, going back to the beginning of who the Fool is supposed to be indicative to who we are and what we want to do in our journey throughout life, right? And even though there are many things that can happen, the Fool starts off as a 0 because he's the 0 major arcana. You know, there are many different things that occur along the way. So, cards, how do you play with them? Is it like Uno, Cards Against Humanity? JK, now and they're not playing cards. Actually, this is the very beginning part of the stream that you kind of missed, was that the tarot is an actual card game. It's just that some people took the card game itself and made it into this today. So you can use them as playing cards. They are technically playing cards. And people back in the day used to use this deck and to play a game called Tarochi. So yeah, so even though this can sound really mystical, super like mystifying, divine, spiritual, all this other stuff, at the end of the day, they're just cards. Literally, they're just cards. And they have been used throughout time to play card games. Which is why I'm not trying to get too hung up on the Fool's Journey and its true meaning to me, you know? But it's nice to at least talk about it because we know it's there. So, yeah, and it's really all about the person reading the story. Exactly. It's all about how the story really resonates with you. And I think this is like a really great start to kind of the series or the intent that I want to do for like food for thoughts, for like every other Sunday that I want to do. We're just gonna be very different vibe from what I normally stream in, but this is the kind of stuff that's been intriguing me a lot lately, and this is the kind of stuff that's kind of been fascinating me, you know? This is the kind of stuff that I find so interesting because you can look at this in so many different... I guess I kind of, before I sign off with today's stream, which I'm highly considering putting on YouTube, maybe break it up into parts so it's all digestible content instead of just a 3-hour stream. But if there's anyone has any questions, I guess before I kind of head out, then I'll do that. And I'll do my best to answer it as long as it relates to the Fool and his journey. Then I will go off with that. And I guess before I also go off, I would like to at least flip one card. So, and I guess one of the things that I want to ask is, as we go into this next week, Monday through Friday, you know, what is a lesson that we would like to learn from this week? Or what is going to be the focus of this next upcoming week that we should really take into account as we go about our regular day? It's a nice fun card. Okay, I'm just gonna pull one at random. I shuffled. I've been shuffling, I promise. Look, I'm shuffling now. I have no idea. Well, this is the fun part about tarot, right? It's a matter of asking a question and then pulling cards and interpreting them. That's all tarot is. So, in relation to what we've been learning about the Fool, we don't know much about it, so I guess we're just gonna have to do this based on instinct, which is kind of how we're supposed to approach this anyways. What is a lesson that the universe wants us to learn during this next upcoming week? Let's go with that. The Moon. So, I guess the real question is, based on the Fool story that we learned about the Moon, you know, what are some of the things that we should be mindful of as we go through about our week? So I'll just pull it up right there so everyone can actually see it. This is the one that looks how it looks like for me. And I will certainly be keeping an eye out. And then the next time we do a stream like this, which is going to be in 2 weeks. So today is the 26th. So the next time I'm going to do it is going to be on June 9th. So on June 9th, I'm going to come back to this. And then I'll remember that we draw the Moon card. And then we'll share how that Moon card played throughout the week until we meet again and talk about this kind of stuff. So in the meantime, I really do appreciate everyone tuned in. Thank you so much for anything and everything. You guys have been great and amazing. And yeah, we'll just have some fun throughout the week, just like we should. Today was more of a take us to church moment, I guess.